I inherited a weathered cabin on an abandoned stretch of coastline from my wife, while my son received a luxurious estate in a renowned mountain city. He smirked, "Go live with the rats," and threw me out of the house after 37 years we'd shared together. I drove there on a rainy night, hoping only for a place to sleep. But when I opened that cabin door for the first time, I found something my wife had prepared for me in her final days. Evidence of a life I'd never known, existed a son I'd never truly understood, and a secret that could destroy everything. That's when I realized, hello everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, comment below and tell me where you found this video. Your interaction means everything. This is a story about a family destroyed by lies, a son drowning in secrets, and a daughter caught in the middle. It's about whether broken families can heal. Important. This story contains fictional elements for narrative purposes. Names and locations have been changed to protect privacy. But the core message is real and worth your time. Let's begin. I inherited a weathered cabin on the Oregon coast from my wife, while my son got a sprawling estate in Aspen. He smirked and said, "Get out and go live with the rats," then threw me out of the house we'd shared for 37 years. That morning, I sat in William's law office in Portland, watching dust motes dance in the pale winter light, filtering through tall windows that overlooked the Willamette River. The attorney shuffled papers across his mahogany desk with methodical precision, his expression carefully neutral as he read the details of Susan's will. I'd known this moment was coming, knew it in that part of me that had suspected something was wrong during her final months. But nothing prepared me for the words that would reshape everything I thought I understood about my wife. "Your wife has left the property at Cannon Beach to you," William said, adjusting his reading glasses and pausing for effect. "That's the cabin. Approximately $3.2 million in current market value, with recent state offers reaching $4.1 million. He paused, letting that sink in, watching my face for a reaction. "Your son Nathan receives the Aspen property valued at roughly $1.2 million. I nodded slowly, trying to process the numbers. The cabin. I'd only been there once, years ago, perhaps 15 years now, when Susan first mentioned it casually over dinner. She'd said it was an investment, something for the future, a place to retreat when the world became too much. I hadn't thought much about it, since assuming she checked on it occasionally, or hired someone to maintain it. We'd never discussed it again. Never spent time there together. It was simply absent from our life the way some things become after the initial conversation fades. What I didn't expect was the mention buried deeper in the document pages, in almost hidden among the legalese and conditional clauses. There's also a reference here." William continued, his voice dropping lower, taking on a tone that suggested he understood the significance of what he was about to say. "To someone named Emma. Your wife established a trust fund for her medical expenses. $2 million. He paused, letting that number settle like a stone into water. "And there's mention of a treatment facility in Colorado for someone else. Conditional support, it says. All arranged 3 weeks before Susan's diagnosis became terminal." My chest tightened. The air in the office suddenly felt thin, difficult to draw in. Who is Emma? "That information isn't in the will," William said, and I detected something in his voice, sympathy perhaps, or the professional distance of a man who'd witnessed many betrayals disguised as legal documents. "Your wife was quite private about it. The trust was established 17 years ago, and all records are sealed. I'm sorry, but I can only tell you what's here. 17 years. The number echoed in my mind. 17 years of a life I knew nothing about. The door to the office burst open without warning, the handle slamming against the wall hard enough to leave a mark. Nathan stormed in, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle working beneath his skin, Jennifer trailing behind him in a cloud of expensive perfume and designer clothing. My son's face had gone a deep, mottled red, not the healthy flush of exertion, but the angry, dangerous color of someone about to lose control of themselves. "Call! This is bullshit!" Nathan spat his voice raw, slamming his palm on William's mahogany desk, hard enough to rattle the lamp. "She's giving him the valuable property, the one everyone wants, the one that's already had 2 offers above asking price, and I get stuck with a $1.2 million estate in one of the most exclusive mountain towns in the country." William said quietly, his lawyer's voice cutting through Nathan's rage with surgical precision. "It's the principal," Jennifer interjected, stepping forward to place a hand on Nathan's shoulder. She was a tall woman with calculating gray eyes and the kind of beauty that came from discipline and expense rather than warmth. The kind of woman who'd married my son not for love, but for access to things, money, status connections. Susan promised Nathan the best. "We've been planning our entire future around the cabin's potential. The development opportunities alone." "The cabin isn't for sale," I said. It came out quieter than I intended, my voice barely steady. Nathan turned to me then, and I saw something in his expression that chilled me deeper than any winter wind could. Not disappointment, not even anger, really. Contempt. Pure, distilled, unfiltered contempt, the kind a man saves for something he considers beneath his notice. "You're going to sit in that rotting pile of wood and do what exactly?" His voice was low now, which made it worse. "Pretend you're some kind of victim mom's gone, and now you're the poor old guy living in a shack while I'm stuck with a property that's worth nothing without the beach access we don't have, without the resources to develop it properly. Do you understand what you've taken from us? The Aspen estate is quite valuable." William began attempting to restore order. "It's not valuable enough." Jennifer cut in, her voice sharp as broken glass. She moved closer to Nathan, her hand finding the small of his back, in a gesture that looked more possessive than affectionate, more like ownership than love. "We have plans. We have a vision for that property. And Susan's will just ruins everything we've worked for." I looked at my son, really looked at him across that wide desk, and tried to find something familiar beneath the anger. The boy who'd asked me to teach him to fish when he was 7. The teenager who'd needed my help with his first heartbreak, sitting in my truck for 3 hours while he cried. He wasn't there anymore. Something else had taken his place, something harder and colder and utterly foreign to me. "I want you out," Nathan said, his voice dropping to something worse than a shout, a steady, measured statement of fact. 48 hours. Pack whatever matters and get out of this house. Everything else stays." "Nathan," I started. 48 hours, he repeated, and Jennifer smiled beside him, a smile of genuine pleasure, the smile of someone who just won a game I hadn't known I was playing. "Or I'll have you removed." That evening, I moved through the house in a daze, pulled from room to room by habit and necessity. I found the old leather suitcase from the attic, the one that had traveled with Susan and me on our honeymoon to Niagara Falls 38 years ago, back when the world felt full of possibility, and we believed we understood each other completely. I packed methodically, without emotion, a few changes of clothes, photographs in their frames, my father's watch with its worn leather band, a couple of books Susan had given me over the years. The movers arrived at dawn, and by noon, they'd cleared out everything Nathan and Jennifer deemed unworthy of their new life. I stood in the empty living room as the last truck pulled away, looking at the faded squares on the walls where family pictures had hung for decades. Through the window, I could see the garden Susan had tended so carefully, the rose bushes, her absolute favorite, dormant now in winter, waiting for a spring she would never see. That night, I loaded everything into my old pickup and drove north toward the coast. The rain started somewhere around Salem, steady and cold, hammering against the windshield as I climbed into the Cascade Range. My hands gripped the steering wheel as the miles accumulated, as the life I'd known receded behind me like the tide going out. By the time I reached Cannon Beach, darkness had fallen completely. The cabin loomed before me in the beam of my headlights, a weathered structure with peeling paint, the color of an old bruise vines crawling up one side like grasping fingers, windows boarded over. It looked exactly like what Nathan had said it would, uninhabitable. A place for rats and regrets. I used the old key William had given me. The lock stuck, then gave way with a click. When I pushed open the heavy wooden door, I heard it creak on its hinges like something waking from a long sleep. That's when I stopped breathing. The inside of the cabin was nothing, absolutely nothing like the exterior suggested. It was immaculate. The floors gleamed. Furniture was arranged with deliberate care, comfortable, worn but well-loved pieces positioned to face the ocean view. On the kitchen counter, fresh flowers sat in a glass vase beside a bowl of fruit. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and something else, something alive, something that spoke of habitation and care. I moved through the rooms like a man in a dream. The kitchen was fully stocked with food. The bathroom was spotless towels, soft and recently laundered. And on the shelves in the bedroom, there were photographs. Dozens of them. Susan, my wife, and a young woman I'd never seen before in my entire life. They were laughing together in these photos, cooking in this very kitchen, walking on the beach, arms linked, sitting on the porch with books in their laps, the ocean stretching behind them. In every single image, they were together, intimate, real. I picked up one frame with shaking hands. Susan's arm was around the young woman's shoulders, and they were both smiling at the camera with such genuine joy, such complete and perfect happiness, that it hurt to look at them. Who was Emma, and why had my wife been living a secret life here, while I'd been living alone in the house we'd shared for 37 years? The first thing that hit me wasn't the smell of decay I'd expected. It was lavender. I'd driven for 2 hours straight from Portland, the rain stopping somewhere around the Coast Range and giving way to a heavy mist that clung to the landscape like a held breath. The road wound through dense stands of evergreens, their branches so heavy with moisture they seemed to be weeping. By the time I reached Cannon Beach, the sun was making its weak attempt at breaking through the clouds, painting everything in shades of gray and pale gold. The town itself was quiet in that way. Small coastal communities are in winter. Most of the tourist shops closed, the streets largely empty, the whole place holding its breath until spring arrived. I drove north, following the directions from the Keys tag until the houses began to spread out, and I could see glimpses of the ocean through the trees. Then I saw it. The cabin came into view around a bend, and for a moment I thought I'd taken a wrong turn. This couldn't be the place. This couldn't be what Susan had left me. The structure was weathered in the way that suggested decades of neglect. The paint, a sickly blue-green, was peeling in long strips like skin after a sunburn. The wooden railings of the front porch were warped and rotting. Several windows were boarded over with plywood, and the front door hung at an angle that suggested it had taken considerable abuse from the coastal wind and salt spray. The whole building seemed to be slowly surrendering to entropy, giving itself back to the elements one board at a time. Nathan had been right, at least about that. This looked like a place where rats would live, not people. I sat in the truck for 5 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, trying to reconcile the image before me with the idea that my wife had owned this property, that she'd left it to me, that she'd thought this mattered. The key William had given me was old brass, worn smooth from age. It fit into the lock with surprising ease, and the door swung open on hinges that seemed well maintained, despite everything else suggesting abandonment. That's when I smelled it. Lavender. Not the overwhelming chemical lavender of air freshener, but something real, something that meant someone had deliberately chosen this scent. Someone had cared enough to place lavender in this cabin, to let it dry naturally to maintain its presence. I stepped inside and stopped breathing. The cabin's interior was nothing like its exterior suggested. It was immaculate. The small living room was organized with clear intention. A worn but comfortable sofa faced a stone fireplace, its hearth swept clean. Bookshelves lined one wall filled with volumes whose spines showed they'd been read many times. Throw pillows in soft earth tones invited you to sit, to stay, to feel like you belonged here. The deception was masterful. From the outside, the cabin appeared uninhabitable. From the inside, it was a home. I moved into the kitchen and found the first real evidence that someone was living here regularly. A bowl of fresh fruit sat on the counter, apples, oranges, bananas. Some were beginning to brown at the edges, suggesting they'd been purchased approximately 3 days ago. In the refrigerator, I found milk with an expiration date that had passed 3 days prior. Leftover containers held what looked like homemade soup and pasta. Fresh vegetables filled the crisper drawer. Someone was feeding themselves here. Someone was living here with care and intention. My hands began to tremble as I moved through the rooms like a man investigating a crime scene. The bathroom was spotless, white towels hung on heated racks, and they smelled like fresh laundry, the kind of clean that comes from line drying or careful washing. The medicine cabinet, when I opened it, contained prescription bottles, multiple bottles. My hands shook as I read the names on the labels, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Emma, Emma, Emma. The prescriptions varied, some for pain management, others for muscle weakness related to spinal muscular atrophy (SMA), several for inflammation and immune support. The dates were recent, refilled regularly. The bottles indicated treatment regimens that cost thousands of dollars monthly. Beneath them, I found a folder containing medical bills addressed to Emma at this address. Treatment plans from specialists in Portland. Progress notes documenting the slow, progressive nature of her condition. The careful management of a disease that couldn't be cured, only slowed. And beneath those letters, some addressed to Susan Holloway at this same address. Others with no name at all, just dates and careful handwriting. In the smaller bedroom, I found what stopped my heart completely. Photographs covered one entire shelf. Albums, loose prints, framed images. In every single one, Susan was there, and she was smiling with a joy I'd forgotten she possessed. In one, she and a young woman were making pasta together, flour dusting their hair and clothes, both of them caught mid-laugh. In another, they sat on the porch, overlooking the ocean, reading books side by side, shoulders nearly touching. A third showed them walking along the beach, the young woman moving slowly, carefully, using a cane for support. Susan's arm linked through hers. The woman in the photographs was beautiful, in the way that suggested she'd possessed beauty before something had taken physical strength from her. Dark hair, bright eyes, a smile that reached those eyes in the way that means something real. I sat on the edge of the bed and held one framed photograph with trembling hands. Susan and this woman were at a restaurant somewhere, their arms linked, their faces flushed with laughter. The date on the back read 6 months ago. 6 months ago, my wife was somewhere I didn't know, with someone I didn't know, living a life I knew nothing about. On the nightstand, I found a medical file. Inside were documents with a name repeated over and over. Emma, just Emma. No last name on these documents, though they contain treatment plans and prescriptions and references to spinal muscular atrophy, a progressive genetic condition affecting motor neurons. The dates spanning years, not months. Years of treatment. Years of care. Years of managing a disease that would slowly steal mobility, strength, independence. Years of a life I'd never known existed. The most recent bill indicated monthly medical expenses exceeding $20,000, gene therapy treatments, physical therapy medications that represented the cutting edge of SMA management. Susan had been paying this every month, every single month. I picked up another photograph, the last one in the album. Susan and the young woman stood together in front of this very cabin, their arms around each other's waists. The picture was recent, maybe just weeks old. In the background, I could see fresh flowers planted in the garden beds, and the sky was clear and blue. Susan's expression in that photograph was one of profound peace, of purpose, of a woman who'd found something she'd been looking for. On the back in Susan's careful handwriting were 6 words. My daughter, my greatest joy, my Emma. Daughter! The word made no sense. Susan couldn't have a daughter. We'd never had other children besides Nathan. I would have known. I would have remembered. Except looking at the photographs covering this shelf, looking at the lifetime of care preserved in this small cabin, looking at the prescription bottles and the medical files and the fresh flowers and the carefully maintained home, I realized how little I actually knew about the woman I'd married. How many silences I'd filled with assumptions. How many questions I'd never bothered to ask. How much of her life had happened in the spaces where I wasn't paying attention. I moved through the rest of the cabin with growing dread and fascination. In the kitchen drawer, I found unopened bills addressed to both Susan and Emma at this address. In the closet, I found women's clothing in 2 different sizes. On the small desk, I found letters written in Susan's hand, but never sent addressed to people I didn't know, discussing things I couldn't begin to understand. And beneath the desk in a wooden box, I found something that made me stop entirely. It was a letter. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive. My name was written on it in Susan's handwriting. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I sat on the floor of that small cabin on the Oregon coast and held my wife's last message in my hands, feeling the weight of all the secrets she'd been carrying, feeling for the first time since arriving the full force of her absence. Outside, the sun was setting over the ocean, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. Inside, I sat in the growing darkness and tried to understand how a man could live with someone for 37 years and know nothing at all about her. The cabin was warm. Someone had paid the heating bills. Someone had maintained this place with love and care. Someone had waited here for the day I would finally arrive and discover what my wife had built without me. Emma. Whoever she was, wherever she was real. And Susan had loved her enough to build an entire secret life around her. The question wasn't who Emma was. The question was, what else had I missed? She didn't see me at first. She was maneuvering through the cabin's front door with a grocery bag balanced precariously in one hand, her other gripping a wooden cane with the careful precision of someone who'd learned exactly how much weight it could bear. Her dark hair fell across her face as she concentrated on the angle of entry, and I watched as she shifted her weight, adjusted her stance, and managed the small feat with quiet determination. It was late afternoon by then. I'd been sitting in the cabin for 6 hours, moving through rooms like a man in a trance, cataloging my wife's secret life in meticulous detail. The grocery bag told me she'd be home soon. I should have left. I should have driven back to Portland and processed all of this with professional help. Instead, I'd made coffee in a kitchen I'd never known existed and waited. She looked up as she closed the door behind her, and her entire body went rigid. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the small living room. She was perhaps in her early 20s, with the kind of sharp features that suggested intelligence and careful observation. Her dark eyes were taking me in, assessing, calculating, searching for answers in my face, the same way I was searching for them in hers. You're Thomas, she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was calm, steady, with an undertone that suggested she'd been preparing for this moment far longer than I had. That's not a guess. How did you... I started, but she cut me off by setting the grocery bag down on the kitchen counter with careful movements. She pulled a chair out from the small dining table and sat down slowly, methodically, like each movement required calculation. Jenny talked about you constantly, she said. When she first found me, I thought maybe she just felt guilty. But it wasn't that. She spoke about you like you were. She paused, searching for the word. Like you were the most important thing in her world. I felt something crack inside my chest. Who are you? I'm her daughter, the young woman said simply. Her biological daughter. She placed me for adoption when she was 17. She found me 2 years ago. The words didn't make sense. They weren't in any order that my brain could process them into something coherent. That's impossible, I said. Susan would have told me. I would have known. She wanted to tell you, she said. There was no accusation in her voice, but that somehow made it worse. She wanted to for a long time, but she was afraid of how you'd react, of whether you'd understand, of whether it would change things between you. She looked out the window toward the ocean, visible in patches between the trees. And then she got sick, and it became more complicated. I moved to the sofa and sat down my legs, suddenly uncertain about their ability to support me. What's your name? Emma, she said simply. Just Emma. You have a progressive condition, I said. It wasn't a question. I'd read the medical files. Spinal muscular atrophy, SMA, she confirmed, and there was something matter-of-fact about the way she stated it, like it was just another fact about herself no more or less important than her hair color. It's progressive. I'll need a wheelchair in maybe another year or two. After that, she shrugged. The disease determines the timeline, not me. How much? I asked quietly. How much has she spent? More than she could afford, Emma said. She refinanced the house, took out loans, sold some of her jewelry, and then she bought this place 3 years ago and started putting money aside for me. Emma gestured around the cabin. She said she wanted me to have somewhere to go, somewhere to live that was just mine. I looked at the young woman sitting across from me and tried to reconcile her existence with the wife I'd known. Susan had been private, yes, but this wasn't privacy. This was erasure. A whole person, a whole daughter erased from our marriage, from my knowledge, from everything I thought I understood about the woman I'd spent 37 years with. She was a good mother, Emma said, and something in her voice made me look at her face. She was crying, though her expression remained calm. The tears just moved down her cheeks, like they were inevitable, like they didn't require permission. I know it's weird to hear a stranger say that, but she was. She found me, and she didn't have to do any of this. She could have just given me money, or ignored me, or pretended I didn't exist. But she didn't. She showed up. She called every week. She came here whenever she could. Why didn't she tell me? The question came out broken. Because she was protecting you, Emma said. She reached beside the sofa and pulled out a wooden box. It was small, about the size of a book crafted from dark mahogany, with careful attention to detail. On the lid there was a carved design, a rose, I realized seeing it now. I'd made this. I'd crafted this box in high school woodshop class and given it to Susan on our first anniversary, back when we were young enough to believe that objects could contain promises. I hadn't seen it in decades. She kept this on her nightstand, Emma said softly. She told me you made it. She said it was the most precious thing she owned. My hands were shaking as I reached for it. The wood was warm under my fingers, the finish smooth from years of handling. I opened it carefully, half expecting my own emotions to spill out instead of whatever Susan had placed inside. What I found made the world tilt. Letters. Dozens of them. All addressed in handwriting I recognized immediately, my own handwriting from decades ago. Letters I'd written to Susan during the year we were apart when my job had taken me to San Francisco. Letters I'd assumed she'd thrown away along with so many other things from our early years. But she'd kept them, every single one. She'd kept them in the box I'd made with my own hands, and she'd kept them safe. There are more. Emma said quietly. Photographs, a journal, some jewelry, but mostly it's those letters. She read them a lot, especially toward the end. I looked up at Emma, this girl who was my wife's daughter, and my wife's secret, and my wife's attempt to reach out from beyond the grave and tell me something I was only beginning to understand. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because she asked me to," Emma said simply. "She told me that when you found out about me, and she said when not, if I should let you read them. She said it was important that you knew how much she loved you, even when you didn't know what she was doing, even when you didn't know who she really was." Inside the wooden box were dozens of letters, each one addressed in handwriting I recognized immediately. Mine. My hands shook as I lifted the first envelope. The paper was cream-colored, expensive. The penmanship on the outside was meticulously careful, the handwriting of someone who knew these words mattered more than anything she'd ever written. Emma watched me from across the small living room, her face carefully neutral. The letter inside was dated 2 weeks before Susan died. "My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, then you've met Emma and learned the truth that I was too much of a coward to tell you while I was still alive. I'm sorry. Before I explain, you need to understand what's happening with Nathan." My heart stopped. The cancer came back 2 years ago. The doctors gave me 6 months. That was 3 months ago now. I looked up from the letter, unable to breathe. Emma was still watching me, still saying nothing. "I didn't tell you because I couldn't bear to watch you suffer again. You were so strong the last time. I couldn't ask you to do that again. I couldn't watch your face every morning knowing I was the reason you couldn't sleep at night." The words blurred. I set the letter down and pressed my palms against my eyes, but the tears came anyway. Hot and fast. Susan had been dying, and I'd been moving through our daily life with no idea. I'd been complaining about grocery bills. I'd been making plans for a future she'd already known she wouldn't see. 3 months ago, Nathan's bank called me. They said something about a loan application requiring my signature as co-owner of the Aspen property. I never signed anything, Robert. I never signed anything. My son had forged my wife's signature. I hired a private investigator. Nathan took out a loan for $1.2 million using the Aspen property as collateral. He falsified my signature on every document. The money went to private lenders, the kind of people you don't owe money to casually. Jennifer was involved. She's the one who convinced him to do this. She's the reason he went to those people instead of asking us for help. I felt something crystallize inside me, a cold, clear anger. That's not all, Robert. Nathan has been stealing from you. From your retirement account. Small amounts over time. The total comes to $85,000. He's been doing it for more than 2 years. I set the letter down and walked to the kitchen window, gripping the counter until my hands went white. My own son had reached into the life I'd built and taken pieces of it. He'd been stealing from me for 2 years. I needed time to figure out what to do. I couldn't leave you in the middle of this chaos. I couldn't leave you with a son in debt to dangerous people and a daughter-in-law who was systematically destroying your family. So I bought time. I made plans. I made a plan to protect you, Robert. I made a plan to save Nathan from himself. And I made a plan to leave you with the tools you'd need to survive what comes next. There are more letters in this box. Each one will explain a piece of what you need to know. Each one will tell you what I did and why I did it. But first, I need you to know this: I love you. More than you will ever know. And that's why I had to lie. I read the letter 4 times before I could reach for the second envelope. Emma had brought me water at some point. I drank it without tasting it. The second letter was dated 4 days later. The handwriting was shakier now. Robert, this is the hard part. Nathan took out that loan because he decided the answer to his problems was money, and he decided to get it no matter what. 2 years ago, when Nathan asked us for money for business opportunities, we both said no. What we didn't know was that he'd already decided the answer didn't matter. The Aspen property had been increasing in value. Nathan saw it not as a home, but as collateral. He saw it as permission to borrow against our future without asking us. He found people who would lend to him without asking questions. People who care about one thing getting paid with interest on time. He borrowed $1.2 million. He promised to pay it back within 18 months. He used my signature to do it. He forged it repeatedly on every document. The investigator found the loan papers. The signature wasn't even close to mine. It was crude, rushed, obviously fake. But the lenders didn't care. They had the property as collateral. Jennifer knew about this from the beginning. More than that, she encouraged it. She wanted the money. She had plans: a house in Miami, a luxury car, a lifestyle that Nathan's income could never support. So she pushed him toward the lenders. She made the connections. She was there when he signed the forged documents. When the bank called me, I realized what had happened. My son had committed fraud, and my daughter-in-law had helped him do it. I stopped reading. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped steel bands around it. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I should have told you. You're thinking I should have gone to the authorities. And you're right. But Robert, I was running out of time and I couldn't leave you with this. So I made a different choice. I hired the investigator to document everything. Every fraudulent signature. Every transfer of funds. I created a complete record of what they'd done. Then I started moving money. I liquidated my personal assets. I took out second mortgages. I refinanced everything I could. And I moved that money into accounts that Nathan couldn't touch. I created a trust for Emma's medical care. I bought this cabin and paid it off completely. And I created a plan that will only work if you're brave enough to see it through. When I finished reading, my hands were steady again. That terrible steadiness that comes after shock when your body stops responding normally. Emma was still watching me. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Since last year," she said quietly. "Jenny told me everything. She said I needed to know in case something happened to her, in case you needed help understanding." Emma reached over and tapped the wooden box gently. "There are 6 more letters," she said. "Each one explains a different piece of what Jenny planned. Each one tells you what to do next." I looked at the stack of envelopes still waiting inside the box. Each one a piece of my wife's final message. Each one a piece of the truth she'd been gathering like stones, building a wall I could stand behind. "I'm not ready," I said. "I know," Emma replied. "But you will be. By the time you've read them all, you will be." That's what Jenny said. She said you're stronger than you think you are. I looked at the young woman who was my wife's daughter, who was living in the cabin my wife had bought with money my son had stolen, who was waiting for me to finish reading letters that would change everything. And I reached for the 3rd envelope. The report was 400 pages long. Not a typo, 400 pages of meticulous documentation. Emma handed me a USB drive around midnight. "Jenny said you'd need this when you were ready," she said simply. "I think you're ready now." I wasn't sure I was ready for anything, but I took it anyway and plugged it into Emma's laptop. What appeared on the screen made the room tilt slightly. The investigator's report was staggering in its detail. Every dollar that had been stolen was accounted for. Every forged signature had been photographed and cross-referenced. Every lie had been meticulously documented. There was a photograph first. Nathan at a bank in Miami leaning over a desk signing documents. His handwriting was clear and unmistakable. The date stamp read exactly 3 months ago. Behind him stood Jennifer, her hand on his shoulder, smiling. Then came the statements. Page after page of bank transfers. Each one a small withdrawal from my retirement account, $800 here, $600 there. Never enough to trigger an alert, but consistent. Systematic. Planned. $700 removed on a Tuesday. $900 on a Friday. $800 again the following Wednesday. It happened every week. For more than 2 years. The investigator had marked up each transfer in red. The grand total was circled at the bottom, $85,000. The forged signatures were there too. Documents from the Aspen property sale. Loan agreements that bore Susan's name but not her hand. Mortgage applications where the signature was crude and rushed, nothing like the careful penmanship I recognized from 37 years of watching her sign her name. A handwriting expert's analysis was included. The signatures show significant deviation from authenticated examples. The forged signatures appear rushed and inconsistent. And then there was the audio file. I almost didn't click on it, but I did because I needed to hear it in their voices. The recording was from 6 months ago. Timestamp 3:47 a.m., Nathan and Jennifer whispering in the Aspen house. "Did you finish the bank documents?" Nathan's voice was tense, urgent. "Done," Jennifer replied. "Just make sure you sign Mom's name exactly like the sample I gave you. What if Dad notices the money's missing?" There was a pause. "By the time he notices, we'll be gone," Jennifer said. Her voice was calm, clinical. "We take the villa, clear the debt, and disappear. South America, maybe. Somewhere they can't touch us." "And Mom," the pause that followed was the worst silence I'd ever heard. "Your mom is dying, Nathan," Jennifer said. "She's got maybe 6 months left. By the time she figures out what we've done, we'll be gone. And by the time that happens, well, her medical bills for Emma's SMA treatment will stop being a problem for anyone." I had to stop listening. I had to close the laptop and stand up and walk away, because if I didn't, I thought I might break something. My hands were shaking. Emma watched me with sad, steady eyes. She'd heard this before. She knew what it contained. She knew that Jennifer had mentioned her explicitly had reduced her existence to a financial burden, a medical cost. "There's more," Emma said quietly. I took a breath and sat back down and clicked continue. The investigator had included a financial breakdown. The Aspen property had been valued at $1.2 million when Nathan and Jennifer first started planning. But the real estate market in Colorado had contracted. Current market value $400,000. Nathan had borrowed $1.2 million against an asset that was only worth $400,000. He owed $800,000 with no way to pay it. And the lender was someone named Mr. Garrett. There was a photograph. A man in his 60s with flat, dark eyes. The investigator's notes read, "Known associate of organized crime, multiple arrests, no convictions." The note at the bottom, "Payment due in 30 days. Default consequences will be severe." 30 days. Nathan had 30 days to pay $800,000 he didn't have to a man who broke people for a living. But then I found the second set of documents. These were different. These showed bank transfers originating from Susan's accounts. One transfer for $1.2 million made 2 weeks before she died. The recipient was listed as a trust account in William's name. The description read, "Debt Settlement and Medical Care Trust." There was a letter dated the same day. It was in Susan's handwriting, but addressed to William. "The funds have been transferred. This money is specifically designated for the settlement of Nathan's outstanding debt with Mr. Garrett, $1.2 million full payment. The remainder is designated for Emma's permanent medical care, specifically for her ongoing spinal muscular atrophy SMA treatment. However, release of funds for Nathan's debt is conditional. Nathan must complete a minimum of 6 months in a qualified treatment facility in Colorado. The treatment must be documented with progress reports. If Nathan does not complete treatment, all remaining funds are placed permanently in Emma's trust. If anything happens to me before this is executed, William is to contact Thomas immediately. I looked at Emma. "Did she know?" I asked. "Did Susan know they were talking about her dying like it was convenient? Did she know they mentioned your medical costs like you were an obstacle?" "Yes," Emma said simply. "That's why she moved so fast." That's why she liquidated her insurance policy. That's why she set up the trust. She needed you to understand what you were dealing with before you had to deal with it. I looked back at the laptop screen, at the photograph of Mr. Garrett, at the accounting of my son's theft, at the evidence of my daughter-in-law's calculated cruelty, at how they'd discussed letting a dying woman's medical debt become irrelevant because she wouldn't be around to worry about it. Susan had seen it all coming. She'd understood that Nathan wasn't just desperate, he was capable of betraying his own mother. That Jennifer wasn't just ambitious, she was willing to exploit a terminal illness and dismiss a disabled young woman's needs. And Susan had prepared for it. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence had been collected with surgical precision. My wife had been lying to me not out of malice, but out of mercy. She'd been protecting me from a truth that would have destroyed me while I was still whole enough to be destroyed. She'd been ensuring that Emma, her real daughter, the one she'd chosen, would never again be treated as a financial burden. When Nathan called for the 15th time, I finally answered. I sat on the porch of the cabin with the USB drive in my lap, the evening air cool against my skin, the ocean invisible in the darkness, but present in every breath. Emma was inside giving me space, but I could see her silhouette through the window, waiting. The same way Susan must have waited for years, holding secrets that belonged to everyone in this family. My voice was very calm when I spoke. Too calm. The kind of calm that arrives just before a storm breaks, when the pressure in the air becomes almost unbearable, and everything goes still. His voice cracked on the single word, the way a voice cracks when fear takes over. Dad, thank God. I've been calling for days. Where are you? I could hear panic in his breathing. Real panic. The kind that comes when someone realizes their carefully constructed lies are collapsing like a house built on sand, when the walls they've so carefully maintained are beginning to crumble under the weight of exposure. I know about the loan, Nathan, I said. My voice was steady in a way I didn't know it could be, in a way it hadn't been since Susan died. I know about the $1.2 million you borrowed from Mr. Garrett using forged documentation. I know you used the Aspen property as collateral with signatures that weren't your mother's. Silence. The kind of silence that means a person has stopped breathing entirely, that their entire nervous system has seized in the moment between hearing the words and understanding their implications. I've seen the bank statements. I continued, my voice unwavering. I've examined the forged signatures on the loan documents, compared them to your mother's real signature. I've traced the money through 3 different accounts, and I know about the withdrawals from my retirement account. $85,000, Nathan. Taken in increments of $800 to $900 every few days over more than 2 years. I could hear him breathing now, fast and shallow, like an animal caught in a trap. Who told you? His voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. Dad, who told you? I know about Mr. Garrett, I said, and my voice was colder now. Harder, edged with something I'd never heard in my own tone before. I know that he's not like normal lenders. I know that he deals with people who can't go to legitimate banks. I know that people who fail to repay him sometimes disappear. I know he's already threatened you. I know all of it, Nathan. Dad, you don't understand. Nathan's voice rose, now tinged with desperation. You don't know what these people are like. If I don't pay him back, he'll hurt me. He's already made it clear. These aren't bank executives, Dad. These are criminals. Real criminals. They've already told me what happens if... Your mother was dying, I said. I cut through his excuses like a blade through water. She was dying while you were stealing from me, while you were forging her signature on loan documents, while you were planning your escape route to South America. No, Dad, I never touched Mom's accounts. The money came from yours, I swear to God. I never forged her actual signature on anything that would have hurt her financially. I wouldn't do that to Mom. So I heard the recording, I said quietly. The recording Jennifer made, the one where she talked about your mother, where she said it was fortunate that Susan didn't have much time left, where she said it would make things simpler when you inherited. Nathan made a sound that might have been a sob or might have been a gasp of pure terror. It was the sound of a man who realizes there are no more lies left to tell, that every escape route has been cut off, that the game is over and he's lost. That was just she didn't mean it like that. Jennifer talks without thinking sometimes. She was upset about the financial situation, but she never actually... I've read everything, Nathan, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Quiet conviction carries more weight than shouting ever could. Every document, every bank statement, every forged signature, every transfer, every lie, I have it all. And now you're going to tell me the entire truth, or I'm going to the police with everything I have. Dad, please. Nathan's voice was breaking now, genuinely breaking. If you go to the police, these people will kill me. They're not joking. They're not making empty threats. They will actually kill me. You don't know what they're capable of. You don't understand organized crime. They don't care about the legal system. They care about money, and they care about people who cross them. I let that hang in the air between us for a moment. The weight of it. The fear in his voice was genuine. Whatever else Nathan had done, whatever lies he'd told, whatever crimes he'd committed, his fear of Mr. Garrett was absolutely real. You're going to drive to Cannon Beach, I said finally. There's a cabin here, by Bien Cannon, Oregon. You know where it is. You're going to drive there tonight. Alone. I can't, Dad. I can't leave Portland. If I disappear, if I'm not here, they'll go after Jennifer. They'll hurt her. They've made threats about what they'll do if I try to run. You don't understand how this works. You're going to leave, I said, and there was something in my voice now that must have sounded final because Nathan stopped mid-sentence. You're going to tell Jennifer that you're meeting with me. You're going to drive to this cabin, and you're going to walk through that door, and you're going to tell me every single detail about the loan, about the theft, about what you and your wife planned. And if I don't... Nathan's voice was very small now, broken in a way I'd never heard before, like a child who's lost everything. Then I'm going to the police, I said. I'm going to give them everything, the documents, the recordings, the evidence, all of it. And I'm going to press charges, fraud, forgery, theft, whatever they can make stick. And Mr. Garrett, he'll be the least of your problems. Nathan was crying now. I could hear it in his voice, not the performative tears of a manipulator, but the genuine sound of a man whose entire world was collapsing at once, whose careful construction of lies and theft and ambition was crumbling into dust. What time? His voice was barely audible. Midnight, I said. Don't be late. I hung up before he could respond. I turned off my phone, watching the screen go dark. For the first time in months, I felt like I was breathing normally, like I was in control of something. Anything. Emma emerged from the cabin and sat beside me on the porch step. She didn't say anything. She just nodded, and I understood that Susan had prepared her for this moment too, that my wife had known I would need to do this, that she'd left me everything I needed, the documents, the evidence, the truth, to become the kind of man who could stand in front of his own son and deliver an ultimatum. Around sunset, I texted Nathan the coordinates, just the GPS location and nothing else. No explanation, no softening of the blow. I saw his headlights cut through the darkness around 11:47 p.m. The black BMW looked obscenely out of place on the gravel road leading to the cabin, all leather and expensive chrome gleaming in the moonlight, like something from another world, a world of money and lies and comfortable deception. My son emerged from the car, slowly, carefully, like a man walking to his own execution. He saw me standing on the porch, backlit by the warm light from inside, and his entire body seemed to collapse inward on itself. "Dad," he said. His voice was barely a whisper now. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just looked at my son, really looked at him, and tried to find the boy I'd taught to fish and helped through his first heartbreak. He wasn't there anymore. In his place stood a man I didn't recognize. A man capable of forging his mother's signature. A man who'd stolen from his own father. A man who'd listened to his wife talk about his dying mother's convenience without protest or conscience. "Come inside," I said finally. The door was open behind me, warm light spilling out onto the cold night. "We have a lot to discuss." Nathan came through the door like a man walking to his execution. His face went completely white when he saw Emma sitting beside me. "Who is this?" he asked. His voice was thin, uncertain. "Why is there someone here?" "Nathan," I said quietly. "I want you to meet your sister. This is Emma. She's your mother's daughter." For a moment, he just stared. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "That's impossible. Mom would have told me. She would have..." "Mom gave me up for adoption when she was 17, Emma said. Her voice was remarkably steady for someone who'd just met her half-brother under circumstances like these. "She found me 2 years ago. She's been taking care of me ever since." Nathan sat down heavily in the nearest chair. He looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from under him. "Sit down," I said. It wasn't a request. Nathan sat. I didn't wait for him to settle before I started laying out the documents. Bank statements, loan agreements, photographs from security cameras. "Did I know about the loan, Nathan?" I said. "I know about the $1.2 million. I know about Mr. Garrett. And I know about the money you've been taking from my retirement account." Nathan's hands started shaking. "Dad, I can explain. I was desperate. Those people were threatening me and I didn't know what else to do. If I didn't get the money..." "I know you didn't make this decision alone," I said. I pushed a photograph across the table toward him. It was from the Miami bank. Nathan leaning over a desk, his signature visible on the documents in front of him. Behind him, barely visible in the background, was Jennifer. Her hand was on his shoulder. She was smiling. "And that's Jennifer in the background," I said. "Jennifer who convinced you to forge your mother's name. Jennifer who pushed you toward dangerous lenders. Jennifer who didn't seem to care that your mother was dying while you were making these plans." Nathan stared at the photograph like it was a snake. "You didn't do this alone," Emma said quietly. "And Mom knew that. She knew about all of it. How could she possibly..." Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. "She hired an investigator," I said. 2 years ago, when the bank called her about the fraudulent co-signature, she documented everything, Nathan, every transfer, every forged signature, every conversation between you and Jennifer. I opened the laptop. The investigator's report was still there, all 400 pages of meticulous documentation. I didn't play the audio file yet. I let him read through the bank statements first. Let him see his own theft laid out in black and white, transaction by transaction, lie by lie. "This isn't... I didn't..." Nathan's voice trailed off into nothing. "There are security camera photos from the bank in Miami," I continued. "The teller still remembers you. She remembers Jennifer too. She remembers the documents you signed. She remembers the conversation you had about liquidating assets quickly." I pushed the photographs across the table. Nathan's face clear as day. Nathan signing documents. Nathan standing with Jennifer in the bank lobby. "But you can't deny this," I said. You can't make this go away, and you can't hide behind desperation or threats from Mr. Garrett. Because your mother knew about all of it, and she made plans for it anyway. Nathan looked at Emma like she was a ghost. Your mother spent the last months of her life making sure you had a chance, Emma said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. She transferred $1.2 million from her life insurance to settle your debt. She did it on the condition that you enter a treatment program, that you actually deal with the addiction and the compulsion that led you here in the first place. I don't have an addiction, Nathan said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. Chaktintongs, you stole $85,000 over 2 years, I said. Small amounts carefully hidden. You forged your mother's signature. You borrowed money from people who break legs for a living. That's not desperation. That's compulsion. That's addiction. Nathan's entire body seemed to collapse inward. He put his face in his hands. Mom knew, he asked. His voice was muffled. How much did she know? Everything, I said. She knew about the loan. She knew about the theft. She knew about Mr. Garrett. And she knew about Jennifer helping you do it. Jennifer didn't. She just what? I leaned forward. She just encouraged you to commit fraud. She just convinced you to steal from your own father. She just listened to your mother talk about her cancer diagnosis and calculated how convenient it was that she wouldn't be around to interfere. Nathan looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. There's a recording, I said quietly, of Jennifer and you talking about Mom, talking about her dying. Would you like to hear it? Nathan shook his head violently. No, I don't. I think you need to, I said. I reached over and clicked play. The recording was only 3 minutes long, but it felt like 3 hours. Nathan's voice desperate and urgent. Jennifer's voice cold and calculating. The casual cruelty with which she discussed Susan's imminent death. The way she talked about disappearing to South America. The way she planned to abandon everyone without a second thought. When it finished, Nathan was weeping. Not the controlled tears of someone experiencing appropriate remorse, but the desperate gasping sobs of someone whose entire world had collapsed at once. Your mother loved you, I said. My voice was steady, though I wanted to rage. She loved you enough to keep your secret. She loved you enough to pay your debt. She loved you enough to set up a plan to save you from yourself. I don't deserve it, Nathan said. I don't deserve any of it. No. I agreed. You don't. But your mother gave it to you anyway. Because that's what mothers do. I pushed a thick folder across the table. It contained the terms of the trust. The treatment facility in Colorado. The court-ordered requirement to complete 6 months of intensive therapy before any money could be released. I say, this is your mother's last gift to you, I said. A chance to actually change, to actually become something other than a thief and a liar. You have a choice to make, Nathan. You can take it or you can refuse it and face the legal consequences on your own. Nathan looked at the folder like it was the most dangerous thing he'd ever seen. When, he asked quietly. How do you leave tomorrow? I said. The facility is expecting you. You'll check in, you'll start the program, and you'll spend the next 6 months actually dealing with what's wrong with you. And if I don't, then I go to the police, I said. And I give them everything. The documents, the recordings, the evidence. Jennifer goes with you. You both face charges. Emma reached over and placed her hand on mine. For the first time, I noticed that Nathan was looking at her with something other than shock. He was looking at her with a recognition, perhaps, of what his mother had sacrificed for a child who wasn't even biologically hers. Your mother chose Emma, I said. She chose to love her, to care for her, to make sure she had a future. That's the person your mother was, Nathan. That's who she spent her final months trying to save you from becoming. Nathan didn't respond. He just sat there, staring at the folder, at the documents, at the evidence of his own deception, laid bare in the cabin that his mother had built for a daughter he didn't know existed. If you've made it this far with me, please comment 1. It's how I know I'm not alone in this journey. And I need to be honest with you, from here on some details have been changed to protect my family's privacy. The core truth remains, but certain names and places have been altered. If you're not comfortable with that, close the video now. No judgment. I pressed play. Jennifer's voice filled the small cabin, cold and methodical. Nathan's face went completely white as he listened to his own voice, desperate, uncertain, matched against his wife's calculated responses. "Did you forge the bank documents?" Jennifer's voice came through the speaker, clear as day. "I'm working on it," Nathan's recorded voice replied. His tone was hesitant, uncertain. "But what if Mom finds out? What if she checks the paperwork?" "She won't know," Jennifer said. Her voice was steady, assured. "Trust me. And even if she does notice something, she's dying anyway. We just need to buy enough time." Nathan made a sound, a small broken noise in the back of his throat. He put his head in his hands. "Make sure you sign her name exactly like the sample I gave you." Jennifer continued on the recording. "I already photographed several of her old checks. The signature pattern is consistent. Just copy the flow and nobody will be able to tell the difference." "What about Dad's retirement account?" Nathan asked on the recording. His voice was thin, worried. "He might notice large withdrawals." "We withdraw gradually," Jennifer said, with the tone of someone explaining something obvious to a child. "Small amounts. 600 here, 700 there. He won't notice. Older people don't check their statements that carefully. And if he does notice something, we'll already be gone by then." I watched Nathan's face as he listened to his wife discussing the theft of my life savings like it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Like it was a problem to be managed, rather than a betrayal to be reckoned with. Emma sat completely still beside me, her expression unreadable. "What if we can't sell the villa in time?" Nathan's recorded voice was uncertain, wavering. "The market's been slow. What if it takes longer than we think? Then we go to Plan B," Jennifer said. Her tone suggested she was discussing something as simple as dinner plans, instead of a scheme to defraud her dying mother-in-law. "We tell Mr. Garrett that Susan will co-sign a bigger loan. The woman's rich. She'll pay anything to protect you. She loves you too much to let you suffer. Mom would never—" "Yes, she would," Jennifer interrupted sharply. "Because she's a good mother. That's her weakness, Nathan. We exploit that. It's that simple. She'll sign whatever we need her to sign because she'll believe it's to help you." The pause on the recording was long. I could hear Nathan breathing, could hear him struggling with what Jennifer was suggesting. "But what if she refuses?" Nathan asked finally. "What if she actually says no?" Jennifer laughed. It was a laugh without warmth or humor, the laugh of someone who'd already calculated every possible outcome, every variable, every contingency. "She won't live long enough to cause problems," Jennifer said. Her voice was matter-of-fact conversational. "The cancer came back. I checked her medical records when I was at your parents' house last month. She's got maybe 6 months, maybe less. By the time she figures out what we've done, we'll already be in South America. We'll have the money, we'll have a new life, and she'll be dead. What's she going to do, follow us from the grave?" Nathan's recorded voice was barely a whisper. That's not funny, Jen." "I'm not joking," Jennifer said. "And if by some miracle she manages to live longer than the doctors predict, we'll convince her you need money for experimental treatment, for alternative therapy, for anything. We'll lie to her face while she's sick and desperate and terrified of losing her son. By the time she realizes we've cleaned her out, it'll be too late. She'll either be dead or too weak to do anything about it." The recording continued for another 30 seconds of silence, just breathing, just the weight of what had been said. Then it ended. The cabin was so quiet. I could hear the ocean outside, could hear the waves hitting the beach in the distance. Nathan was on his knees. Not metaphorically. He was actually on his knees, his body folded forward, his hands covering his face. His shoulders shook with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. The kind of crying that breaks something fundamental open, that reveals the person underneath all the lies. I didn't know. He gasped between sobs. I didn't think she would. I never wanted. You didn't want to think about it, Emma said quietly. Her voice was calm but edged with something harder. There's a difference between not knowing and choosing not to know. You chose not to know. I let the silence sit between us for a long moment before I spoke. I wanted Nathan to feel the weight of it. I wanted him to understand that some things couldn't be unsaid, some truths couldn't be ignored. Your wife was planning to exploit your mother's terminal illness for financial gain, I said. My voice was steady, but it took everything I had to keep it that way. She checked your mother's medical records. She understood exactly how sick Susan was. She knew the timeline. And she was going to manipulate her into co-signing loans while she was actively dying. I didn't know she checked Mom's records, Nathan whispered. I didn't know she understood how serious it was. Your wife is a predator, I said. And you helped her become one. Nathan looked up at me with eyes that had finally truly seen themselves clearly. His face was streaked with tears. His entire body was shaking. What happens now? He asked. His voice was barely audible. What do you want me to do? I pulled out the treatment facility paperwork and placed it on the table between us. Your mother paid $1.2 million to settle your debt with Mr. Garrett, I said. She did it on one condition, that you actually commit to getting help. Real help. Not just going through the motions. Nathan stared at the documents, like they were written in a language he didn't understand. 6 months in Colorado. I continued. Court-ordered intake, group therapy, individual sessions, psychological evaluation, the complete process. And if I refuse, Nathan asked. Then you go to prison, I said. For fraud, for theft, for forgery. You'll face federal charges. You'll face Mr. Garrett personally when he realizes the money he was expecting is going to pay his debt instead of funding your escape. And you'll face whatever consequences come after that. Nathan's shoulders sagged further, as if he'd been physically struck. When do I leave? He asked quietly. Tomorrow morning, I said. 8 a.m. The facility is expecting you. You pack one bag, essential items only. You don't contact Jennifer. You don't contact anyone else. You check in, and you spend 6 months figuring out who you actually are when you're not stealing or lying or running from consequences. Emma placed a folder on the table in front of Nathan. Inside were printouts of Susan's letters. Letters she'd written to her son but never sent. Letters explaining why she'd done everything. Letters offering a path to redemption that she would never live to see him take. Nathan picked up the first letter with trembling hands and began to read his mother's final words. I left him there in the dim light of the cabin, surrounded by evidence of his own deception and his mother's unshakable love. Sometimes the most powerful punishment isn't something imposed from outside. It's the realization of what you've lost, what you've destroyed, what you could have had if you'd chosen differently. I pulled out the final stack of documents. This was the part that would change everything. This was the part Susan had spent months carefully constructing a foundation for her son to stand on or to fall through depending on the choices he made next. Your mother paid your debt, I said simply. All of it. The entire $1.2 million. Nathan's head came up slowly like he'd been physically struck. His eyes widened as he tried to process what I was telling him. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Where would she even get that kind of money? We don't have—" "She liquidated everything," I said. "Her life insurance policy, her jewelry collection, her savings accounts, properties she owned separately. She moved heaven and earth to get that money. Nathan and she did it while she was actively dying from cancer." Nathan's face had gone gray. He looked like he might be sick at any moment. But that money was supposed to be for me," he said. His voice was small, uncertain, almost childlike. "I'm her son. That inheritance was supposed to be mine. That's how it works. That's—" He trailed off as the reality began to sink in. Emma leaned forward, her expression completely cold. "You're her son," she said quietly. "But you stopped being family when you decided to steal from your father and forge your mother's signature. You stopped being someone worth saving when you let Jennifer convince you that your mother's death was a convenience. And the debt has been settled." I continued pushing the bank transfer documents across the table. "Mr. Garrett has been contacted and paid in full. You still have your life, Nathan. That's what your mother bought for you with her final months." Nathan stared at the bank transfer documents. The amount was staggering, a number so large it seemed abstract, unreal. The dates showed it had all been transferred just 3 weeks before she died, while she was in pain, while she was preparing to leave this world. "The Aspen property will be sold," I said. "Whatever profit remains after taxes and fees will go toward your treatment costs. The cabin, this place, will also be liquidated. Everything your mother built, everything she owned, will be converted into your second chance." "Pecan chance." Nathan looked up at me, desperation in his eyes. "Second chance at what?" "At becoming someone your mother could actually be proud of," I said. "At becoming someone who isn't a thief. At becoming someone who doesn't need to steal to feel powerful." Emma pushed another folder across the table. This one contained admission papers to a treatment facility in Colorado. Not a luxury rehab for wealthy addicts seeking discretion. A serious, intensive program designed for people with genuine compulsions and genuine problems. "You're checking in Monday morning," I said. "A car will pick you up at 7 a.m. You'll bring one bag, one change of clothes, toiletries, nothing else. No phone, no outside contact for the first 2 weeks." Nathan's hands were shaking as he reached for the admission papers. His fingers hovered over them like they might burn him. "The program is 6 months," I continued. "Group therapy, individual sessions, psychological evaluation, intensive treatment for gambling addiction and the underlying issues that led to your crimes. After that, you'll need to figure out how to rebuild whatever can be rebuilt." 6 months. Nathan's voice cracked. "I can't. I have responsibilities. Jennifer needs me. The business is the least of your concerns," I said. "And Jennifer has made her own choices." "And if I refuse?" Nathan asked. There was desperation in his voice now, a man grasping for any escape route. "Shakikuri, then the trust is voided," I said. "Every penny of it. Jennifer faces charges alone and goes to prison. You face Mr. Garrett personally with no protection and no resources. And you spend the rest of your life understanding exactly what your mother was willing to sacrifice for you." Nathan put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook with sobs that seemed to come from a place he didn't know existed inside himself. "There's one more thing," I said quietly. I reached for my phone and made a single call. "It's done," I said into the receiver. Then I hung up. Less than 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the cabin door. Emma stood up and opened it. 2 police officers stood on the porch, their expressions neutral and professional. One was a woman in her 50s. The other was a younger man with a notebook in his hand. "We're here for Jennifer Holloway," the female officer said. "We have a warrant for her arrest on charges of fraud, forgery, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." Nathan's head snapped up like he'd been struck. "What? No, she's not even here. She's at home in Portland. You can't—" "We're aware," the officer said. "She's already in custody. We picked her up 2 hours ago at your residence." I watched as Nathan's world collapsed again, in a different way this time. He'd been willing to accept punishment for himself, but seeing Jennifer actually arrested, actually being held accountable for her own choices, seemed to break something in him that hadn't been broken before. The officers showed me a copy of the warrant and confirmed the details. Everything had been arranged quietly, professionally. No media circus. No spectacle. Just consequences delivered with the precision of a surgeon's blade. "Mia Nathan," I said, and he looked at me. "Your mother didn't just save your life from Mr. Garrett. She saved it from yourself. She created consequences that are inescapable and inevitable. She made sure that no matter what you chose to do, you would have to face what you've become." Nathan's eyes were red and swollen from crying. He looked destroyed. He looked for the first time like someone genuinely confronting their own darkness. "This is your mother's last gift to you," I said. "A chance to actually change. A chance to actually become someone worth saving. Don't waste it." Nathan looked up at me, and for the first time since he'd arrived at the cabin, I saw something in his eyes that resembled actual remorse. Real understanding. The beginning of genuine accountability. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was barely audible. "For everything. For Mom. For Dad. For all of it. I'm so sorry." "I'm not the one who needs your apology," I said. "Neither is Emma. Your mother's already gone. You'll have 6 months in Colorado to figure out who you need to become in order to live with that fact." Nathan nodded slowly. He looked at Emma, really looked at her for the first time. "I'm sorry," he said to her as well. "For being angry when you showed up. For resenting you. For not understanding what Mom was trying to do for you. For all of it." Emma didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence contained everything that needed to be said. Outside, the sun was setting over the ocean, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow, my son would leave for Colorado. Tomorrow, my daughter-in-law would face trial. Tomorrow, everything would begin to change in ways we couldn't yet imagine. But tonight, Nathan sat alone with his mother's letters, and finally began to understand the magnitude of her love. The courtroom fell silent as the judge prepared to read the verdict. I sat in the gallery, Emma beside me. Behind us sat William the lawyer who'd executed Susan's final wishes with precision. 2 months had passed since that night at the cabin. 2 months of depositions, discovery, legal maneuvering. 2 months of watching the system grind toward justice. Jennifer sat at the defense table in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She'd maintained her composure throughout the trial, maintained her story, that Nathan had acted alone, that she was merely a victim of his lies, that she had no knowledge of criminal activity. The audio recording destroyed that narrative within the first hour of testimony, on the counts of forgery, fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. The judge said, his voice carrying through the courtroom like a gavel strike, "The jury finds the defendant guilty on all counts." Jennifer's face went white. She made a small, strangled noise as reality crashed down on her. The prosecution had been methodical and devastating. They'd presented the bank statements first, then the photographs. Then Paul, the bank employee, testified that Nathan had claimed his mother authorized the transactions with what appeared to be legitimate documentation. "I didn't have any reason to suspect fraud," Paul had said under oath. "The paperwork looked authentic. The signatures appeared to match previous documents." But then came the handwriting expert, a woman who'd spent 30 years analyzing forensic documents. She placed Susan's actual signature beside the forged ones, and the differences became painfully obvious. The forged signatures were rushed, inconsistent, the product of someone trying to replicate something without understanding it. The investigator's testimony followed. 400 pages of documentation. Every transaction tracked. Every lie catalogued. Every piece of evidence, including the $20,000 monthly medical expenses for Emma's spinal muscular atrophy SMA treatment, presented with surgical clarity. And then the audio recording. When Jennifer's voice filled the courtroom, calm and methodical, as she discussed exploiting a dying woman, the jury's expression changed completely. One woman closed her eyes. "She's got maybe 6 months left," Jennifer's recorded voice said. "By the time she figures out what we've done, we'll be gone. And by the time that happens, well, her medical bills for Emma's SMA treatment will stop being a problem for anyone." The silence that followed was suffocating. Nathan had been tried separately. His attorneys argued for leniency, pointing to his cooperation with investigators, his guilty plea, his participation in the treatment program that had begun the day after his arrest. The judge acknowledged all of this. Unceremoniously. Nathan Holloway. The judge said, "On the counts of theft, forgery, and conspiracy, the jury finds you guilty. However, in light of your cooperation with authorities, your guilty plea, and your progress in treatment, this court offers an alternative sentencing arrangement." Nathan looked up, hope flickering across his face. "Hasu, you will serve 3 years of probation," the judge continued. "During this time, you will continue treatment at the Colorado facility. You will submit to regular psychological evaluations. You will complete community service. And you will make full restitution to your father and sister." The word hung in the air. Sister. The first time it had been spoken aloud in official capacity. Emma straightened slightly. "Do you understand the terms?" the judge asked Nathan. "Yes, Your Honor," Nathan said hoarsely. Jennifer received 5 years in prison. The judge was clear about why her sentence was more severe. She'd been the architect, the one who calculated that a dying woman was an acceptable problem. She'd explicitly mocked the medical needs of a disabled young woman as a financial inconvenience. The defendant demonstrated a callousness and premeditation that this court finds particularly troubling, the judge said. She committed these crimes while explicitly discussing her victim's terminal illness and the medical costs of caring for a disabled dependent. That level of cruelty warrants a substantial sentence. The Aspen property was ordered sold to pay restitution. The proceeds, approximately $400,000 after taxes and fees, would go toward covering stolen funds, fraudulent loans, and civil damages. Thomas and Emma received a separate judgment, $350,000 in compensation for losses and emotional trauma. I watched as the judge banged his gavel one final time. Jennifer was led away in handcuffs, screaming her protest. Nathan was released to the treatment facility's custody with orders to check in by 6 p.m. that same day. As we filed out, Emma touched my arm. "It's over," she said. But I knew it wasn't. Not really. Nathan's real trial was only beginning. He'd spend the next 3 years proving whether his mother's faith in him had been justified, whether a person could actually change, whether redemption existed in more than just theory. Outside the courthouse, reporters called out questions. I didn't answer. Emma didn't either. We walked past them toward William, who waited with a quiet smile of professional satisfaction. "The restitution will process within 30 days, he said. "The property sale should close by then." I nodded. Money, justice, legal remedies for crimes that no amount of compensation could truly address. But it was something. It was accountability. It was the system imperfect as it was working the way it was supposed to. Later that evening, I sat alone at the cabin and reread Susan's final letter. If you're reading this, it means justice has been served. It means Nathan is facing consequences. It means Jennifer has been held accountable. But the real story won't be written in a courtroom. It will be written in Colorado in group therapy sessions and quiet moments of reflection. It will be written in Nathan's choices day by day for the next 3 years. I'm asking you to believe in him, Robert. Not to forgive what he's done. Not to pretend it didn't happen. But to believe that people can change. That's all a mother ever really hopes for. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the wooden box. The one Nathan had made for Susan all those years ago, back when he was still the person she believed in. Whether he could become that person again was a question only time could answer. The cabin was quiet around me. Outside, the ocean crashed against the rocks, the sound both endless and permanent. The same sound that had witnessed her love for Emma, her plans for redemption, her desperate hope that somewhere in her broken family transformation might still be possible. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness of the Oregon coast. Tomorrow, I would call the realtor about listing the cabin. $4.1 million. Enough money to change my life. Enough to start over. But tonight I would sit with this moment, with the weight of justice served and the uncertainty of what came next. Because that's what Susan had left me in the end. Not just answers, but questions. And the understanding that sometimes those questions are more valuable than any answer could ever be. 3 months after the trial, the state of Oregon made an offer for the Cannon Beach property. They wanted to develop it into a protected coastal area. The offer came in at $4.1 million. I didn't hesitate. I accepted immediately. The money was distributed according to Susan's wishes. Emma received $1.5 million in a trust that would cover her spinal muscular atrophy SMA treatment for the rest of her life. The remaining funds came to approximately $2.6 million. That money was mine. For the first time in my life, I had real security, real choices. The cabin was demolished within weeks. I didn't watch. Emma didn't want to either. We let it go quietly, watching from a distance as the bulldozers came and reduced Susan's gift to rubble. It seemed fitting. The structure had served its purpose. Now it would become protected land. Emma and I moved to a small house about 2 miles north of Cannon Beach. It sat on a 1/4 acre with an ocean view from the back porch. I called it home the moment I walked through the door. There was a garden out front, overgrown and untended. I spent the first month clearing it, preparing the soil. Emma watched from the porch, offering suggestions, and I realized I was doing something I'd never done before, building something with my daughter. Because that's what she was. Not by blood, but in every way that mattered. Emma was my daughter, and I was her father. We planted Susan's favorite flowers, roses, lavender, hydrangeas. By summer, the garden was alive with color. I retired from the manufacturing job in September. 40 years of work, and I walked away on a Tuesday without ceremony. The company threw a small party. I smiled and thanked them and felt nothing but relief. Emma started university that same month. She'd chosen sociology, drawn to understanding how people survive trauma and how communities heal. When I asked her why, she told me, because Mom showed me that one person can change everything. I want to learn how to help that happen for other people. I drove her to campus 3 days a week. She insisted on living in the dorm, needed the independence, but we had dinner together twice a week. We talked about her classes, her books, her world. Her health improved incrementally. The treatment Susan had paid for continued under Emma's direction. The SMA didn't disappear, but she learned to live with it. Some days were harder, days when the disease pulled tighter. But the combination of physical therapy, medication, and determination gave her a quality of life that exceeded what the doctors had initially predicted. The people of Cannon Beach learned the story. Small towns don't keep secrets. They learned about Susan, a woman who'd loved enough to sacrifice everything, who'd planned for her son's redemption, even as she was dying. I started doing repair work around town, fixing porches, replacing windows, helping people who couldn't afford contractors. It wasn't work I needed to do for money. It was work I needed to do because staying still felt like betrayal. The neighbors started calling me when things broke. "Thomas will fix it," they'd say, and I would. In the garden, I planted Susan's favorite rose, a deep crimson variety that bloomed prolifically. I placed a small stone bench near the flowers and put a photograph on it. Susan smiling her arm around Emma, both of them caught mid-laugh on the porch of the old cabin. "She's not here," Emma said once, finding me sitting on that bench early in the morning. "I know," I replied. "But you talk to her sometimes. I've heard you." "Is that strange?" I asked. "No," Emma said, sitting beside me. "I do too." We sat in silence, and I thought about Susan's letters, about how love sometimes means lying, about how the deepest truth can come from the most carefully constructed deception. Emma started having dizzy spells in her 4th month of university. Doctor's visits confirmed what we'd been waiting to hear: the disease was progressing. By spring, she'd need a wheelchair for campus. By summer, her independence would be curtailed in ways neither of us was ready to face. But she didn't stop going to class. She adapted. She organized her schedule around her energy levels. She learned to ask for help when she needed it. And I learned watching her what real strength looked like. That was when the letter arrived from Colorado. It came on a Tuesday morning, addressed to both of us. The envelope was thick, official. It was from the treatment facility, forwarding a message from Nathan. Emma opened it. We read it together. "He's finished the program," she said quietly. "And he wants to meet with us." I held the letter in my hands. Nathan had been sober for 18 months. The treatment program had documented his progress: regular therapy sessions, group participation, psychological evaluations, all showing consistent improvement. The letter from his counselor indicated genuine transformation, but the words that mattered most were Nathan's own. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you both to know that I understand what I did. I understand who I hurt. And I'm spending every day trying to become someone that Mom could be proud of." Emma looked at me. "What do you think?" I thought about Susan's final letter, about her plea to believe in Nathan's capacity for change, about the 3 years of probation and treatment that she'd structured so carefully. "I think," I said slowly, "that we should hear what he has to say. But not yet. Not today." There was still time to heal, still distance to travel before we could bridge the gap that Nathan had created. But someday, maybe in the spring, when the roses bloomed again, when Emma finished her 1st year of university, maybe then we could try. I looked out at the garden, at the crimson roses Susan had loved, at the life we were slowly building on the foundation she'd left behind. "He has to prove it," I said, "day by day, just like Mom did for us." Emma nodded. She understood. She'd grown up understanding the cost of love, the complexity of loyalty, the way forgiveness and accountability had to dance together if they were going to mean anything at all. Outside, the ocean continued its eternal work. Inside, we sat in the quiet of our home, a real home built on truth and time, and the slow, careful work of learning to trust again. 6 months into the treatment program, I received a letter. The handwriting was shaky, uncertain, as if Nathan's hands were trembling as he wrote. But the words were deliberate, careful, honest in a way I hadn't heard from my son in years. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't think I deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know that I'm trying, actually trying. I completed stage 1 of the program today. I sat on the porch bench beside Susan's photograph and read every word carefully, my hands shaking slightly. The counselors here keep saying that gambling addiction is a disease, and I guess it is. But that's not an excuse for what I did. The disease didn't forge Mom's signature. The disease didn't push me to steal from you. The disease didn't make me listen to Jennifer talk about exploiting a dying woman without saying anything. I made those choices, all of them. I made them because I was desperate and stupid and afraid. The letter was 4 pages long. Each page was filled with Nathan's attempt to articulate something he'd apparently never put into words before genuine remorse. Not the performative apology of someone trying to escape consequences, but the slow, painful work of actually seeing what he'd done. I've been reading Mom's letters, the ones she left for me, over and over. I've read them so many times the paper is starting to wear thin. And every time I read them, I understand more clearly what she knew about me. She knew I was capable of lying. She knew I could hurt people. She knew I could steal from my own father. And she loved me anyway. I had to stop reading for a moment. I had to look away at the ocean, at the sky, at anything that would let me breathe without feeling like something was breaking inside my chest. I work in the kitchen here. I wash dishes, prepare meals, help other people get through their day. It's not glamorous work. It's not the kind of work I thought I'd ever do. But it's honest work, and it matters. Yesterday, this guy, his name is Marcus, he had a panic attack during dinner. He couldn't breathe. He was convinced he was dying. And I sat with him for 2 hours until it passed. I didn't fix anything. I didn't solve his problem. I just sat with him and told him he was going to be okay. And afterward, he thanked me. He actually thanked me for sitting with him. And I realized something in that moment for the first time in my life. I did something that mattered, that didn't involve taking something from someone else. For the first time, I gave something without expecting payment. That sounds small, but it felt enormous. The letter continued with details about his daily life. The other patients he was meeting. His counselor, Dr. Mitchell, who apparently didn't let Nathan off easy, who pushed him to confront his own excuses, who made him sit with the reality of what he'd done. Group therapy is hard. We sit in a circle, and people tell their stories. A woman named Sarah talks about how she bankrupted her family through compulsive shopping. A man named David talks about how his addiction cost him custody of his children. And I listen to these stories, and I hear my own story in them. I hear someone who used addiction as an excuse. Someone who hurt people. Someone who didn't care because caring would have meant changing. Dr. Mitchell makes us look at the people we've harmed. He makes us write letters we'll never send. He makes us understand that our addiction is real, but it's not an excuse. I know I can't come home yet. I know I need to finish this program. I know there's a long road ahead. I know that even when I finish here, I'll have years of probation, years of rebuilding trust that I've probably destroyed permanently. But I wanted you to know that I'm on that road. I'm actually on it, Dad. I'm not pretending. I'm not trying to get out early or manipulate the system. I'm actually trying. Can I call you? I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to try. I folded the letter carefully and held it for a long time before I showed it to Emma. She read it in silence, her expression unreadable. She was using the wheelchair now. The disease had progressed faster than the doctors predicted, but her mind was as sharp as ever. "What do you think?" I asked her quietly. I think he's trying," she said, finally looking up from the letter. "I think it's a start, but I also think you need to be careful. People can say anything in a letter. It's the follow-through that matters." "I know," I said, "but I want to give him a chance." 2 days later, Nathan called. His voice sounded different on the phone. Smaller somehow. Less certain. When he spoke, it was like listening to a stranger who happened to share my genetics. "Dad," he said. His voice cracked on the single word. "Thank you for taking my call. Thank you so much." "Hello, Nathan," I replied. I kept my voice neutral, careful. I wasn't ready to offer warmth. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. "How are you?" I'm okay," he said. "I mean, I'm not okay. I'm in a treatment facility, but I'm stable. I'm trying to be better. There was a long pause. Chick, I know I don't deserve another chance. He said immediately, the words tumbling out like he'd rehearsed them 100 times. I know what I did. I know how badly I hurt you and Mom and Emma, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking if I can keep trying, if you'll let me keep trying. I'm trying at what? I asked, my voice careful. At being someone you don't have to hate, he said. At being someone Mom would have been proud of. At being someone I could actually be proud of. At becoming a person instead of just whatever I was before. We talked for 30 minutes that first call. He asked about the house, about Emma's health, about the garden. I gave short answers, still protective, still uncertain. But I listened. I actually listened to the words he was saying, not waiting for him to disappoint me, not bracing for another betrayal. Can I write to you? He asked before we hung up. Like Mom did, I want to write to you regularly. I want to keep trying to explain what I'm understanding about myself. I don't expect you to write back if you don't want to. I want to try. Yes, I said after a moment. You can write. The letters started arriving weekly after that. Small handwritten notes at first, then longer letters as Nathan's confidence grew. He wrote about his daily struggles, about sitting in group therapy and hearing stories that mirrored his own, about learning for the first time in his life to sit with uncomfortable emotions instead of running from them or numbing them with gambling or lies. I was reading Mom's letters again, he wrote in one letter. The one where she talks about why she didn't tell you about me. She says she was protecting you, that she couldn't bear to watch you suffer. And I finally understand what that means. It means loving someone enough to lie to them. It means knowing that the truth will hurt them and choosing a different path anyway. I never did that. I never loved anyone like that. I loved myself more than I loved you or Mom or Emma. I used people. I lied to them. I took from them. And I called it survival. I don't know if I'll ever be able to love someone like Mom loved us, but I'm going to try to learn. Emma watched me read these letters week after week, watched me slowly begin to separate the person my son was becoming from the person he had been. Do you think he means it? She asked me one evening as we sat in the garden, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I think he's trying to mean it, I said. Whether that's enough, I don't know yet. Will he come home? She asked. There was a note of something in her voice I hadn't heard before. Not forgiveness exactly, but something that might grow into it given time. I looked at Susan's photograph on the bench at the garden she'd never see, at the daughter she'd saved, and the son she'd tried so hard to rescue. I don't know, I told Emma honestly. But for the first time I have hope that he might actually become someone who deserves to come home. Emma nodded slowly. She reached over and took my hand, and we sat together in the garden waiting for whatever came next. 1 year later, Emma and I sat on the porch of our new house watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. The house was modest, a small cottage just outside Cannon Beach, far enough from the tourist crowds, but close enough to hear the ocean's constant voice. When the cabin sold for the promised $4.1 million, William had helped me invest wisely. The house was paid for. The future was secure. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck or controlled by fear of financial ruin. Emma had completed her first year of university with top marks. Her sociology papers were already being discussed by her professors as examples of exceptional insight and understanding. She'd found her purpose, found her voice, found her way to transform her own pain into something meaningful that could help others navigate their own darkness. The mobility challenges of her disease didn't stop her. Some days were harder than others, days when the muscular dystrophy pulled tighter, when her legs refused to carry her the distances she wanted to travel. But she'd adapted, learned, persisted. A combination of physical therapy, medication, and sheer determination had given her a quality of life that went far beyond what the doctors had initially predicted when she was first diagnosed. The roses Susan had loved were in full bloom, now bursting with color and life. We'd replanted the entire garden in our new space, bringing seeds and cuttings from the cabin. It had become something almost sacred, a living monument to the woman who'd orchestrated all of this from her hospital bed before she died. Red roses, lavender hydrangeas in soft blues and purples. Every plant chosen because Susan had loved them, had tended them with care, had wanted them to flourish long after she was gone. "I was thinking about Mom today," Emma said, breaking the comfortable silence between us. Her voice was thoughtful, weighted with the kind of reflection that comes only with time and distance. "What about her?" I asked, turning to look at my daughter. My real daughter in every way that mattered. "How much she gave up for us," Emma said quietly. "How much she planned while she was actively dying. How she never once let us see how terrified she must have been. She just kept working, kept planning, kept making sure we'd be okay after she was gone." I thought about that. About Susan knowing her time was running out, spending those final months not focused on herself, but on building a fortress for her family. On leaving nothing to chance. On making sure that every contingency was covered, every person was protected, every loose end was secured. "She did what mothers do," I said. "She loved us enough to plan for our survival, even when it meant deceiving us." "But you weren't her biological family," Emma said. It wasn't really a question. She was processing something she'd been thinking about for months, maybe longer. "No," I agreed. "But I was hers, in every way that mattered. And you were always hers. And Nathan—" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Nathan was always hers, even when it seemed impossible to save him." The finances had worked out exactly as Susan had planned them. Her life insurance had covered Nathan's debt completely, every penny of that $1.2 million. Emma's trust fund was growing steadily with careful investment, ensuring she'd have resources for whatever her future held, whatever her disease demanded of her. My portion had given me the freedom I'd never known in my entire life. Freedom from desperation. Freedom to choose my days. Freedom to simply exist without the constant weight of financial fear. Every one of Susan's wishes had been fulfilled with precision and care. The debts were paid. The criminals were held accountable. The guilty had faced consequences in court. And those of us who remained had been given a path forward, a roadmap to healing. Nathan had written to us 3 weeks ago. He was working as a peer counselor at the treatment facility in Colorado, helping other people navigate addiction the way he was learning to navigate his own. He'd been sober for a full year. He was attending therapy twice a week, sometimes 3 times. He was writing us regularly careful, honest letters that showed a man slowly, painfully becoming someone worth knowing again. But we hadn't invited him home yet. "Lost trust takes time to rebuild," I'd written back to him in response to his question about visiting. "Maybe someday, but not yet. We need to see consistency. We need to know that you're choosing recovery day after day without the safety net of expecting forgiveness." I believed it, though. For the first time, I genuinely believed that maybe someday my son could come home, that he could sit at a table with Emma and me, and it wouldn't feel like betrayal or danger. That he could look at us, and we could see in his eyes the man Susan had always believed he could become beneath all the lies. Emma reached over and took my hand. Her fingers were thin but strong, gripping mine with certainty. We sat like that as the sun continued its descent, painting everything in gold and then deeper shades of orange. The ocean beyond our view continued its eternal work waves crashing against rocks. Tide going out and coming back in the rhythm of something larger than any of us, indifferent to our pain or our joy. "Do you think she knew," Emma asked, "how it would all turn out if Nathan would change, if we'd be happy, if things would work out?" "I think she hoped," I said, my voice quiet. "I think she planned for the best outcome while preparing for the worst possible scenario. She left us letters and documents and a roadmap through the darkness, but she couldn't have known for certain how it would end. No one can predict that." "It ended well," Emma said. It was a statement, not a question. "It did," I agreed. I thought about that moment in the wooden box, the moment I'd discovered my wife's final gift. Not just the money or the documents or the carefully constructed plans to save us, but the realization that I'd been loved so completely, so thoroughly, that someone had spent her final months ensuring my survival. Ensuring Emma's survival. Even ensuring Nathan's survival despite his choices, despite his betrayal. Love, I'd learned through all of this, sometimes hides in old letters and secret plans. Love sometimes looks like deception because it's trying to protect you from truths that would break you. Love sometimes means making impossible choices and living with the consequences of those choices. Susan had loved me that way. She'd loved Emma that way. She'd even loved Nathan that way so much that she'd arranged consequences that might save him, might transform him, might give him a second chance at becoming the son she'd always known he could be if someone gave him the opportunity. I had a daughter who was brilliant and kind and learning to navigate the world with courage that broke my heart every single day. I had a future that belonged to me alone, not dictated by circumstance or necessity or fear, but chosen deliberately. And I had the knowledge that Susan had loved me well enough to orchestrate this entire symphony of events to ensure my happiness. "I was thinking," Emma said slowly, her eyes still fixed on the horizon, "about what we should do for Mom's birthday. Next month, I mean. I know she's not here. I know she won't celebrate it or know about it. But maybe we should do something anyway. Plant something new in the garden. Or write letters to her. Something that honors what she did for us." "That's a good idea," I said. "What did you have in mind?" "I'm not sure yet," Emma said honestly. "But something that feels right. Something that says thank you for saving us. Thank you for loving us this completely." As the sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the ocean in shades of deep purple and indigo, I thought about Susan. About the complexity of her love. About the way she'd hidden her truth in service of ours. About how in the end, the most powerful thing she'd left behind wasn't money or documents or carefully constructed plans. It was family. Real family. Not bound by blood or biological obligation, but by choice and love and the deliberate decision to belong to each other. "I belong here," I said quietly. "Finally, after all these years, I actually belong somewhere." "I know," Emma replied, squeezing my hand gently. "We both do." And in that moment, as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began their nightly emergence, I understood what Susan had known all along. That home isn't a place. It's a person. It's the people you choose to keep close, the people you trust with your truth, the people you'd spend your final breaths protecting. Susan had given us that. She'd built it from love and sacrifice and the kind of courage that most people never find. Looking back on everything that's happened, the lies, the betrayal, the slow unraveling of a life I thought I understood, I realize I've become a different man than the one who sat in William's office that cold winter morning. I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me years ago. Don't wait for a crisis to know your family. Don't let secrets fester in the spaces between conversations. Don't assume that the people you love most will always be honest with you. And don't assume that dishonesty means they don't care. Susan lied to me for 17 years, but she did it out of love. That's the lesson I've learned that changed everything. I made mistakes too. I was so focused on my own comfort, my own life, that I never asked the hard questions. I never pushed past the surface. I never demanded to truly know my wife. If I had, maybe I could have helped her carry the weight of Emma's existence. Maybe I could have supported her instead of letting her bear it alone. God teaches us about forgiveness, but I never understood what that meant until I had to forgive my own son. God shows us grace in ways we don't deserve, and I've been shown that grace through Susan's final letters. God asks us to believe in redemption, and I'm learning to believe in Nathan's day by day. The truth is, we are all capable of becoming better versions of ourselves. We are all worthy of second chances. We are all deserving of love even when we've failed the people we care about most. If you're reading this and you're carrying secrets like Susan did, or living with lies like Nathan was, or drowning in regret like I am, know that it's not too late. Tell the truth. Ask for help. Reach out to the people who matter and let them matter to you. That's the real inheritance Susan left us. Not money or property or carefully orchestrated plans, but the understanding that love means showing up, being honest, and choosing each other every single day. Share your story in the comments. Tell me how you found your way through deception or betrayal. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about family redemption and the courage it takes to truly belong, because we all deserve to belong somewhere.